The Dallas Cowboys, Seattle Seahawks, and the referees took the field for Thursday Night Football to kick off Week 13. The Cowboys came out with the win. We break that down, and we predict the rest of the week's games right now on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, football fans, to this Friday episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering the National Football League, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast. I'm David Harrison on Twitter at dharrison82, host of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bucks, credential member of the media covering both of those teams for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation group of sites. He is Tony Wiggins on Twitter at Shot Talking Wig. That's 2 G's on the end. They're host of Locked On Jaguars with more than a decade's worth of experience covering Jacksonville football. Locked On NFL is here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, we greatly appreciate your continued support for the entire network. This episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On today's episode, we're going to tell you who's going to win every single game in Week 13 remaining. We're going to be 100% correct. Even when we disagree, the team that we pick will win the game. We promise you that. That is for entertainment purposes only. But first, we got to talk Wig. Thursday night kicked it all off. The Dallas Cowboys just can't stop putting up 40 points or more on Thursdays. They did it on Thanksgiving. They do it a week later. 41-35. They defeat the Seattle Seahawks. What is your big takeaway from Thursday night's action?
Well, one, it was marvelously entertaining. And we didn't get a dud of a game. The other thing was I was shocked at Seattle's offensive output. And that may have more of a little bit of an indictment on the fact that the Cowboys, I believe, this is the first time they beat a team with a winning record. And now Seattle doesn't have a winning record. They're 6-6. But Dallas is an offensive juggernaut, man. I still can't help but come away from this game thinking that at some point Mike McCarthy is going to coach them into a bad situation. And the reason why I say that is because they had a chance to go for a field goal with a 48-yard field goal with a kicker who hasn't missed all year. And they went for it. It was a 48-yard field goal. It should be a chip shot. That means that instead of being up 6, they would have been up 9, and the game would have been over. And at that point, they weren't winning, but they were down 1 and could have gone up 2. It's just it's head scratching to me that they do that. I was all prepared for a big Stephen A. Smith, you know, the thing he does when he looks at the camera and goes, ah, and busts out laughing. And then I was all ready for Jerry Jones to talk some smack about the bad decision. But McCarthy lives to see another day. He wasn't going to get fired anyway, but still, Dallas won. There's still some questions, though, about how they'll play against good teams.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's certainly some questions here. And Dallas Cowboys this season, they remain undefeated at home, but they're 500 on the road. So that makes every win even more important because obviously every team wants to play at home in the playoffs. But when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, for obvious reasons, they definitely want to be able to play at home in the playoffs. And like you mentioned, Wig, an incredibly entertaining game on Thursday night, which we all know is not always the case. So it's I was very happy to see an entertaining matchup. 10-7 Cowboys lead at the end of the first quarter. By the time we get to the end of the half, the Seahawks have a 21-20 lead, a very fun ending to the first half that only continued on during the game. 28-27, Seahawks held that 1-point lead going into the fourth, but then the Dallas Cowboys do come away. The last 3 scores of the game, a field goal, a touchdown, another field goal. You mentioned they passed on another field goal they could have had. But the last 3 scores of the game all go to the Cowboys, so they come away with a 6-point win, despite the fact that we had 19 penalties in this game. Try as they might, the officials tried to make it all about them, and the Dallas Cowboys and Seattle Seahawks said, nah, guys, this is about us. We're going to put on a show. Speaking of putting on a show, Dak Prescott is starting to get a little bit of MVP conversation surrounding him, and I think part of that has to do with how well he is playing and leading the team tonight. 29 for 41, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 115.8 passer rating. So certainly some good things for him right there. But then I think when you look around the league as well, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles have had some struggles, especially in the red zone. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs have not been dominating the AFC race, and I think that's kind of brought them down. Josh Allen obviously has had his ups and downs. Wig, so do you think it's more a fact that there's no other quarterbacks really kind of just running away with the MVP race, or do you think that Dak Prescott is taking this thing right now here at this point in the season?
Well, I think independently he's playing well regardless of what anyone else is doing. He's just really, really playing well at quarterback. The other thing is this discussion about whether or not he was elite or not, and so many people thinking that he isn't. That aided in this too, because now instead of you already thinking, okay, he's a very, very good quarterback and he does stuff like this, when you down talk him so much and then he does it, now it's almost like you got to give it to him, right? Because everybody said that he was crap this whole time. The thing is people, I don't want to do a whole think piece, but we need to talk about the difference between being elite and playing elite, because most people believe that Josh Allen is elite, but he's not playing at an elite level. There's a difference. You're not a non-elite quarterback, and then all of a sudden this year you start playing elite. That doesn't make sense. It's you can be elite and not play elite. It happens to everybody. It happens in every single sport. It happens in tennis. It happens in hockey. It happens in baseball, right? If a baseball player is an elite player and he goes 0 for 4 tonight, does that mean he's not elite? No, it doesn't. It just means that he had an off night and he had a bad game. And I think sometimes when we have these conversations, what happens is it digs people in a hole. Folks get 10 toes in on their opinion. And then when the guy plays well, now they have to overdo it and with the hyperbole and say they'll say anything other than I was wrong. You know what I'm saying? They'll say he grew up or he finally figured it out. No, he was that the whole time. He just wasn't playing elite. And maybe with football, where there's so many moving parts, sometimes the things around him don't help him become elite, even the coaching staff. So we just probably need to rethink that. But since I said we need to rethink it, I don't think people will.
Geno Smith will certainly attest to what you said about the environment, the coaching certainly matters. I think Geno would tell you that it's not that he wasn't always able to play at the level he's playing these last 2 years. It's that whatever situations, whatever hurdles weren't facilitating him unlocking that ability. And look, he's not going to be happy taking the loss there in Dallas on Thursday night. But if you have Geno Smith on your fantasy roster, 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, he does have the interception, 6 yards on the ground, a rushing touchdown on top of that. You're not going to be upset about that fantasy performance. DK Metcalf, half of his receptions on Thursday night were touchdown receptions, 3 touchdown catches on the night, 134 total yards of offense. And on the other side of things, CeeDee Lamb, 116 yards and a touchdown. Not quite as good as the other guys, but certainly nothing to scoff at either. So Wig, the Dallas Cowboys advance to 9-3. The Seattle Seahawks fall to 6-6. We've got a bunch of other games coming up this weekend. Somebody or many somebodies are going to join the Seattle Seahawks in the loser column, and some of them are going to join the Dallas Cowboys in the winners column. We'll talk about all of those coming up next on today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot with FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bets. That's $150 if your team wins. The Miami Dolphins are currently minus 460 moneyline favorites to beat the Washington Commanders this weekend. Those are the best moneyline odds of Week 13. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Thanks again for making Locked On NFL your first listen or review today and every day, everydayers. Thanks again for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Also dropping On Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern, NFL Kickoff Live talks about all of the game coverage for the upcoming week. You may or may not see my ugly mug on there talking about how one of the teams I cover might be able to cover a very, very high spread that they've got to try to combat there. But we're going to get to that game here in just a little bit, Wig. First, let's start off with the Los Angeles Chargers visiting the New England Patriots. The Patriots do not seem like they're doing a whole lot of good. The Los Angeles Chargers, however, certainly not the competitor that a lot of people expected them to be. Chargers are favored on the road by 5.5. Who comes out of Foxborough with that victory on Sunday?
I won't believe I'm saying this, but it's going to be the Chargers, and that's because the Patriots are absolutely terrible. And they don't know who their quarterback is. I don't think they have one on the roster that's going to be sufficient moving forward. And as up and down as he's been, Justin Herbert is still Justin Herbert. So even if he just has to make one more play than the crew that New England has, I think he's going to do it.
Yeah, I got the Chargers on that one too. The over-under on total points scored, that's both teams combined points scored, is 40.5. So the odds makers are not expecting a shootout in this one. The Dallas Cowboys beat that spread or beat that over-under by themselves on Thursday night. So certainly not a lot of points expected in that one. Not much better in Pittsburgh as the Arizona Cardinals visit the Pittsburgh Steelers. This time, though, the home team is the favored team. 5.5 points is the spread, Wig. Kenny Pickett, Kyler Murray, Deontay Johnson. I don't know if he's going to play or if he's going to pout, but what do you think happens in Pittsburgh?
I think Pittsburgh wins. Too many good players on their defense, especially if Minka Fitzpatrick can come back with Cam Hayward as well as T.J. Watt. So that gives them a great player at every level if you consider T.J. Watt a linebacker. And I think that continuity and Mike Tomlin's ability to make them find a way to win when they don't appear to be very good, and Arizona just isn't very good. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Pittsburgh.
Mike Tomlin is certainly a factor that a lot of people don't talk about as much. And I like, Wig, how every time it looks like the Steelers are going to have a sub-500 record, parts of the fan base just immediately start talking about firing that dude. And I'll tell you what, if there is not a head coach that would have a job faster than Mike Tomlin if he got fired from his current position, I don't know one. And that should tell Pittsburgh Steelers fans who do lean that way, might want to rethink and appreciate what you got there in Coach Tomlin. Moving on from there.
They've had three coaches. I'm 54. They've had three coaches my whole life. I don't understand why the fan base is always asking them to fire people.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, man. But Houston Texans at home, Denver Broncos on the road. The Denver Broncos, arguably the hottest team in the NFL these days. The Houston Texans, surprising a lot of people, they are home favorites by 3.5 points to beat the Denver Broncos. CJ Stroud, Wig, is he going to be the one to end Russell Wilson's November magic?
This is a really, really good game and a tough game to call. I'm going to go with Denver. And the reason why is it's not because they're in the AFC South with the team that I cover, right? The Jaguars got a 2-game lead. I'm not concerned about that. I'm going with Denver because of this reason. I think last week's game meant so much to Houston and they fell short to Jacksonville. Sometimes young teams have that little hangover and they have that little woe is me feeling. And I think Denver right now is really finding their way. I laughed at Sean Payton earlier this year when he got on the old coach and then he started out looking like the worst team in the NFL. But give it to him. He's got it together. He's righted the ship. He traded some people and they've been able to get back on track. So I'm going with Denver.
Yeah, it took them a little while. It really did. And you're not the only one that laughed at Sean Payton, but right now he's starting to laugh back a little bit. And I do think that experience, I think the experience between him, Russell Wilson, the way those guys are playing right now, I do think they pull out that victory. And I think you made a good point. The Houston Texans, as competitive as they've been, they are very young. And anytime you drop a heartbreaker in the division, especially, that is really hard to bounce back from. So I got the Broncos taking that one as well. So far we're batting 1,000 because we're agreeing. So all of these picks are going to be absolutely correct. So the next game, the Detroit Lions on the road visiting the New Orleans Saints. The Lions are 4.5 points road favorites. I have the Lions pulling that one out. Wig, what do you got?
I got the Lions too, coming off of a disappointing loss on Thanksgiving, but going to play a team. I read their press conference where these guys are all over the place. Alvin Kamara, Dennis Allen, everybody's saying different things. To me, they're just not a club right now. It goes a lot to their quarterback too, the way he's always pointing his finger and yelling at people when he doesn't play well. So I'm going with Detroit.
Yeah, I covered a quarterback for about 3 years named Tom Brady when he was with the Buccaneers, and he liked to point and yell at people as well. And you know what? When they were winning and competing for Super Bowls, it was all good. But when they were sub 500 and losing in Pittsburgh, it wasn't all good anymore. And people didn't want to hear it. Derek Carr, there might be some leadership issues going on there with the old quarterback there in New Orleans. Things not going as smoothly as they thought they might with Derek coming into New Orleans. So the Lions come out with a victory there. Moving on to an AFC South matchup. You mentioned the AFC South division. You know that division very well. Indianapolis Colts favored on the road by 1.5 to beat the Tennessee Titans. Wig, I'm not even going to have an opinion on this one. I want you to tell us who's going to win because this is your wheelhouse.
Indy's going to win the game. It's going to be a rivalry, and I understand the 1 point, favorite and the 1 point difference in opinion on that because that's a rivalry game. And while Jaguar fans hate the Titans fans hate the Colts. And shout out to Tyler Rowland from Tic Tac Titans and Locked On Titans because he is the one who told me that. So, but I will go with the Colts. If there's any one little Achilles heel, it's just that they're not going to have Jonathan Taylor. And then Gardner Minshew does have a tendency to turn the ball over. But I don't think Tennessee's good enough to do anything about it.
Yeah, Zach Moss is the fantasy play in that game. He was doing really well while Jonathan Taylor was out earlier in the season. Now that he's going to be out for this game and potentially a couple more even, I think Zach Moss is probably the most popular pickup in fantasy. In fact, if you're watching this episode thinking you're going to go pick up Zach Moss, he's probably already gone. And if he's not, congratulations on the league that you're playing in. I hope you're going to make some money off of that league. Moving forward, the Atlanta Falcons are visiting the New York Jets. These are two teams that are kind of similar. Not a lot of faith in their I would say their coaching, but their current situation. Not a lot of faith in the quarterbacks going on. But Wig, the Atlanta Falcons very quietly are winning the NFC South. And I say it that way because they're not just leading it. They've beaten the Buccaneers. They've beaten the New Orleans Saints. They are winning the NFC South division race for whatever that's worth. Some will call that the biggest loser title there, but they are road favorites, but only by 1.5 over the New York Jets. Do you think that's a fair spread? Are the Falcons not getting enough credit in this one?
I think it's a fair spread. The reason why is because of the Jets defense, and the Jets defense can play really well. Arthur Smith has found out that Bijan Robinson is a real good player, and he's been using him a lot the last couple of weeks. I think that'll be the difference because no matter how good your defense is, if you can't score, eventually they're going to get fatigued. And I think that's when Atlanta shows up and scores the points they need to win the game.
Yeah, if you haven't heard, Arthur Smith doesn't care about your fantasy team. He doesn't care how high you drafted Bijan Robinson. For a while there, he didn't really care about his team having the best chance to win either. But fortunately, he has decided to have that care come out, and it's also impacting your fantasy team if you kept Bijan Robinson. Final game here on this segment, Miami Dolphins visiting the Washington Commanders. That is that big old spread that I'm trying to figure out how the Commanders are going to win. 9.5 point favorites on the road in FedEx for the Miami Dolphins. 49.5 points over under total score. So if you do the math on that, you're looking at the Miami Dolphins winning this thing probably about 40-13. I'm guessing that the bookies are thinking this is going to go. Wig, is 9.5 enough points for the Miami Dolphins? Or do you think that spread should be bigger?
No, I think it should be bigger. I think they'll do 9.5 in the first half. And the reason why is because you expect a team that traded all their pass rushers to stop that offense with all of those weapons and that quarterback who works on timing and Mike McDaniel. It's not going to happen. I think the Miami Dolphins run away with that game and rest people in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it is going to be tough sledding for the Washington Commanders. Never say never, any given Sunday, all those things, but it is going to be tough sledding for the Washington Commanders. Of course, I'll be covering that game for this network on Locked On Commanders. Coming up, we're going to look at the rest of the Week 13 schedule to wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. And Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Gametime gives you the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. And you can see the view from your seat before you make your purchase, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account with Gametime, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, wrapping up our Week 13 NFL picks here on Locked On NFL. Tony Wiggins, David Harrison, giving you all the right picks for the weekend's matchups. Wig, let's continue on here. An NFC South battle. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are trying to stay in this NFC South race, trying to get back in the NFC South race. They are 5.5-point home favorites because they are facing the Carolina Panthers, who have Bryce Young, Brian Burns, and not a whole lot of hope outside of that. What do you think happens this weekend?
I don't think Carolina's going to win another game the way it's going. So whoever they're going to be playing against, I'm going the other way. I just think it's a hot mess, and I think messaging, whether or not you thought Frank Reich needed to get fired this early, it's the way it happened, the whole weird, clunky way. So, yeah, I'm not betting with Carolina.
Yeah, if you like defensive matchups, the odds makers saying that this is the game for you. The over-under total scores for this game, 36.5 points. That's 18 points per team. Not an exciting matchup there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though, are very, very banged up at this point in the season. Expected to be without Levante David, their captain, the heart and soul of their defense for another week. But they still have some playmakers over there. Kalijah Kancey, NFL rookie or defensive rookie of the month, for the month of November, doing very well. But yeah, I think the Buccaneers come away with that one, and it's a much needed win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can find me on Locked On Bucs talking about that game and what's coming up for them after that as well. San Francisco 49ers on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Easily the most entertaining pre-game, before all the games actually happen. This is the game that most people, if you're generally a football fan, you're going to want to see. The Niners are favored on the road in Philly to win by 2.5 points. Wig, the over-under on this one for total points scored is near 50. What do you think happens in this game? And do you think it's a shootout or a defensive battle?
Somewhere in the middle. I think it's going to be a game that has great defensive plays that are made, but eventually all of those guys on both sides of the ball are too good on offense to not put up points. But I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. And the reason behind that is because it's easy to look at the 49ers for the last couple of weeks and just think of how great they are, right? But there was a point in the middle of this year where they weren't great. The one thing about the Eagles is they've been almost losers every time, but they keep winning. So I'm going to go with the Eagles at home. Doesn't mean I think they're going to beat them in the playoffs, but I think for this game, they're going to remember all of that stuff Deebo Samuel said, and they're going to try to put it on.
Yeah, there were some conversations happening after the NFC Championship game that if the Niners didn't lose all of their quarterbacks, that perhaps they would have won that game. So an opportunity for them to get right a little bit, but you know what? It's regular season. So at the end of the day, we'll see what happens in the postseason. I agree with you, though. I think the Eagles come away with this one. 49ers defensive coordinator Steve Wilks called Jason Kelce a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's just trying to get on his good side or not, but either way, a lot of respect, even if there's some trash talking, a lot of respect on both sides of this competition. Next up in their afternoon slate of games, Cleveland Browns on the road to face the Los Angeles Rams, and the Rams are 3.5-point favorites in that one, Wig.
They should be. Cleveland, who they rolling out there? What is it? Joe Flacco, Vinny Testaverde. Who's going to be the quarterback? You know what I'm saying?
Testaverde.
No, they got great defense, but I just think I believe that the Rams are going to pull it out at home. I think it's a tough game for Cleveland.
Yeah, this is a rough one. I mean, honestly, unless I'm a fan of one of these teams, I'm probably not putting any money on it. But I do think the Rams probably have the upper hand just because the Cleveland Browns feel like, not because of any organizational flaws necessarily, although there are some questions about whether a trade they made in the last couple of years is actually worth it. I think more so because of circumstances. The Browns kind of seem lost this season. It might be a little bit of a wash there. The Kansas City Chiefs are looking to stay near and at the top of the AFC race. 6-point favorites on the road to face the Green Bay Packers, who Jordan Love has looked very, very good as of late overall recently. Do you think that continues, or is Patrick Mahomes going to show Jordan Love he's still got a ways to grow?
You know what? I'm going to go out on a limb with this, and some people are going to smack me around. And I know they're going to think that I'm choosing Green Bay because I want Jacksonville to get up in the number 1 seed. But I'm going to take the Packers. I got a weird feeling about this game that what you saw on Thanksgiving from Green Bay was not an anomaly. That's just who they've grown to become. And they can really, really disrupt things on the defensive side with their front seven. And they got some very active DBs. And I don't trust the wide receivers yet for the Kansas City Chiefs, but I'm going to go with Green Bay in this game.
That's interesting. I'm definitely going Chiefs, but I do think the Packers are more what we saw on Thanksgiving than they're not what we saw on Thanksgiving. But I still am taking the Chiefs, but I do believe, like you do, that the Green Bay Packers are better than a lot of people maybe give them credit for. Final game of the week, and we're going to wrap up this episode. Cincinnati Bengals on the road to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. And of course, the Jaguars are favorites. No Joe Burrow. That's always going to swing the odds in the favor of whoever they're playing. But Wig, you might remember I told you a little while ago, James Yarko discovered this pattern in the football universe that the Bengals and Buccaneers never win or lose on the same weekend. So one of them wins, one of them loses, or one of them wins and the other's on a bye week. So no matter what, neither of these teams win or lose on the same weekend. We predicted the Buccaneers to beat the Panthers, which means if that pattern holds true, the Jaguars are going to pull off this 8.5-point game against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Well, even if the Buccaneers lose, the Bengals will still lose because I don't think that quarterback's going to come in here to Jacksonville. Jacksonville's going to have a blackout. And I will say this, though. They won 8 straight on the road, and they haven't done as well at home. And then the games where they've really been looking forward to this year at home, one of them was the game against the Chiefs, and they lost. Another game was the 49ers game, and they got smoked. This one, ain't no Patrick Mahomes or Joey Bosa or Nick Bosa or Deebo Samuel coming in, even though all of those guys that, Cincinnati has on their team, that you got to be able to get on the ball. And I don't trust that young quarterback, especially against the Jaguars defense. I will tell you this. James Rapine of Locked On Bengals and Locked On NFL is already in town. So I get to hang out with my buddy and maybe put a meal on him a little bit and then slap him upside the head once the Bengals start losing when we leave the press box Monday.
Very, very nice. Always great when 2 Locked On hosts are in the same city for a weekend. So I hope you guys get to catch up, and I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. Coming up, we've got Locked On NFL kickoff live at 2 p.m. Eastern Friday. No matter what Locked On channel you're on, you will see that. So make sure you come back from that. And then Monday, Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens will be back with a brand new episode of Locked On NFL. Make sure you're subscribed, got the notifications, the auto downloads, all that stuff turned on. For your second listen of the day, check out Locked On Jags, Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bucks, or just stick right here and we'll send you right over to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen or view today and every day. Thanks so much for supporting the channel like you do. For Tony Wiggins and David Harrison, we will see you right back here next Friday for another episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.